Now once again, it helps us to think of moving from slow to fast, from soft to loud, and from sparse to dense textures, or thin to thick textures. That's the traditional way of approaching Indian music. It also helps us to realize that there's quite a bit of heterophonic texture in traditional Indian music. You've already heard several examples of that with flute and violin, voice and violin, and I want to conclude this last video on the slide, excerpt of about 2.5 minutes, with voice and violin once again. And when it starts out, you're almost going to feel like it's call and response between the voice and the violin, but a little later on, not too far into it, you can hear that they're basically moving through the melody together, but ornamenting in different ways and interpreting the rhythm in slightly different ways.
There are many compositions, the many songs. Basically, everything is divine, devotional in nature, and these are set to these particular scales and then sung with the help of tala, which is the rhythm. To bring Carnatic music to a global understanding. See, I mean, we want to show that it's a very beautiful system. It's another powerful classical system that is there in this world, basically to take it on a global level, not just for the South Indians.
Now I'd like to expand this discussion a little bit now, move beyond just Indian music specifically, and talk about some concepts that are important in all music from all cultures. And that is, first of all, the concept of there being a ratio of unifying elements and variety elements, unity and variety. And it depends on the basic function of that music, that ratio. So, for instance, if music has a very strong dance function, you tend to have more unifying elements. A rhythmic pattern is very strong, very repetitive. You can think of hip-hop music, you can think of techno, electronica, psytrance music, and the idea behind that is it has such a strong dance element that there are many unifying elements and not as much variety, because that's not important for someone who's not listening that actively. They're responding with their body rather than with their mind through the ear. Then, conversely, we have a situation where if music is designed more for listening and processing and thinking, then it has more elements of variety. And at the bottom of all this is a sense that every piece of music, every composition, every performance, that the music should have a sense of momentum. It should have a sense of moving through time. And I promise you that nowhere in the world does any musician ever wake up and say, today I'm going to create some boring music. I'm going to bore my listeners. It just doesn't happen. So if we find music boring, and of course we do find different pieces of music or different styles of music, that they don't move us, they don't affect us, we find them to be boring or static, there are several possibilities there. One is that the musician is just not very skillful in creating that sense of music momentum. The other possibility is that we don't understand the nuances of that music. We don't understand what it is that makes that music move through time. And I think that's the case with a lot of the traditional music we're being introduced to during this course. So I want to try to bring that example home to you by giving you a video, and I want you to consider this question. Does the following music move through time better than other examples we've looked at and listened to today? So, in other words, when you consider the sisters doing their demonstration, when you consider the violin and voice examples, the flute and voice examples, does this example, in your mind, move through time, create a sense of music momentum more successfully than the other ones? after you've listened to that, I have to think that there'd be very few people in the class that would think that that had less momentum than the other things we've listened to. I think most of the class feels that that particular example has more music momentum. It engages your interest more. It resonates with you a little bit more. And I want you to think about why. And if you do have the reaction of it not moving through time as well as some of the other ones, reflect upon that as well. It could be the kind of rhythms that were created there, the digital drum kind of tracks that were present there. It could be those other kinds of synth pad kinds of sounds and harmonies that are in there. It could be that there's a sense of a bass line is different than a drone. And it could be that the sound of the saxophone, even though it's playing in an Indian ornamentation style, obviously not an American jazz style or R&B style, but an Indian type of ornamentation, melodic style, that saxophone familiarity, there are different things in there that for most people that are taking this course would move that music through time for you very successfully.